And kind of speaking of that is like in a world full of tweets and captions, what makes long like form content enticing to you, especially with blog writing?
Yeah, so it's interesting because it seems that everybody wants to hear from uh, the people that they follow more often, more frequently, and um, I think sometimes, at least for me, long form content takes quite a bit more time. And so, one of the things that I think is really important to me is, if I'm being honest, a healthy ego, right? So it's at my core just kind of believing that and not unique to me, but like everyone else, like have something to offer this world, right? And I believe that the world also has a lot to offer me. So the thing is, I want to make sure that I'm creating things that help future generations the way that, say, James Baldwin helps me with, like, for instance, the evidence of things not seen, right? As I am looking at um, how James Baldwin is just like his analysis of not just the Atlanta child murders, but the particular uh, economic and political environment that would allow this to exist or to happen, right? Or like Du Bois, as I go to Du Bois, who had, what, 60, 70-year publishing things,
Yeah.
stuff like that. It's like, okay, well, I don't, I have a particular view that artists are not necessarily um, beginning or ending a conversation as much as they are extending a conversation and opening more people and inviting more people to the conversation. And so with that, that's a part of why I'm like, hey, let me be more thoughtful about creating long form art because I think it's probably I have a concern with what happens with short form content that we're all creating, and what's going to happen to it, and if everything's on like a hard drive or it's some on the some data center, we call it the cloud, but it's stored, so it's somewhere. Like I'm concerned with what happens to all of those things, how we're going to be able to sort through all of these things, how we're able going to be able to organize and then retrieve the important ideas and artifacts that we're leaving behind for future generations. And so, for me, that's part of the reason why I'm actively working towards more booklet projects and other forms that might have longer staying power than, say, a Threads post.
No, you hit a great point, and it was well said, especially when you're talking about Baldwin and W. Du Bois and some of their concepts that you really have to, you only can really get it from long form content, whether it's Du Bois really breaking down this idea of double consciousness. Like you don't get
Mm-hmm.
that from just let me tweet this out type of points. Like that is hard fought through the writing process. And
Yeah.
speaking of that, like, can you discuss your creative process when it comes to composing long form or just newsletters in general?
Yeah, it's very messy. I would say the idea is that I write something, and whenever it comes to me, and maybe it's a notes app. Preferably, it's not. I like to write it down on paper if possible. So I have little notebooks, and there are some of them are like categorized in a particular way, but most of them are not. It's just I need something to write on, and I don't want to lose what I've written. Um, Once I begin creating something that feels like it is a project of some sort, then I put it in a file and I just work through it. It's not like I don't really, I don't really perceive it to be anything that's elegant at all or even scientific. I don't know what happens. My one of my favorite books about making things, just in general, over the last year or two was Carl Phillips' My Trade is Mystery. And there's something there that I think like makes sense to me, right? It's like I don't know what happens. Like I'm currently I'm working on like some a series of small books that I'm just gonna create and give out freely to folks who just come to the website and give me their email address, right? Um, just to kind of build an audience and also to build up a creative stamina for longer projects. Well, I don't really know if those books are writing, or if I'm writing those books, or if they're writing me. You know, to be honest with you. So that's probably like a long form or an overarching, kind of idea of like the creative process. But it's interesting you asked about um, the newsletter, because I've been on a bit of hiatus because I had to press pause. I'm looking at everything, all these different things that are going on in the world, that are going on in my world, and I'm like, hey, it's really important for me to not do this just to be in the newsletter game. I don't have any monetization turned on, anything like that. So I'm like, okay, well, what, to make it short, what's the point? And so I've been really, struggling through that. And I think I've come up with something that makes sense to me as far as what I can put out, and then also what I can sustain, but then also to make it surrounding certain things that I think are important conversations to have and to continue to have. And so the newsletter itself is turning into what I would call a recommendation essay. And so I have, whether it's books, art, TV, film, photography, these different things that I'm recommending, art articles, other Substacks, newsletters and stuff like that, where I'm recommending these things, but they're coalesced around like one big idea or one central idea, central message. And then in addition to that, one or two essays a month with one or two reviews of things per month.
No, you brought up a good point about newsletters, because the world doesn't necessarily need another world newsletter. So when you do bring a newsletter, it's that value that comes with it. Like, I think we think about that a lot too from Bookum. It's like, how do we give the best amount of value in this one newsletter? If they only open this newsletter, how much value can we put into this? So I even like what you're talking about when you're like, hey, I'll have a book I'll drop with the newsletter. I mean, newsletter, just by you putting your email on it. Like, what type of style are those books going to be?
Yeah, so it's somewhat experimental. And so the first one I'm working on is the title is just sales jobs, excuse me. And it's loosely, there are some autobiographical elements, but it's in no way like auto fiction or anything like that. But I'm just taking some like pieces of jobs that I've had before and taking those and turning those into flash fiction, and then so it's 5 or 6 pieces of flash fiction, and then one proper length short story.
Oh, cool.
And so um, just just experimented with some things. And to me, that was, as I was brainstorming, like what would be a good way to kind of put this out. I'm like, well, it's just, I could just directly just give it to people,
Right.
and if they're interested, they can download it and put it on their e-reader or whatever the situation is.
Yeah. Yep. Direct to consumer, right? Direct to your target audience. If you enjoyed that clip, make sure you head over to www.bookumapp.com to download our app so you can connect with your favorite bookish content creators, start conversations, and start your own book club.